Views expressed by Casters Guild members are only the opinions of that member, and that could change from day to day. Guild members may use mature language, but that in no way means they are mature. Listener discretion is advised.
The state of things has us thinking about the apocalypse and just how cool it can be. Rather than dwell on the negative, let's think about the neat worlds based on what happens when everything goes wrong. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. That's the spell we're casting tonight on Casters Guild. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Casters Guild. I am Guildmaster number 1, Rick Perry.
I am Guildmaster higher than number 1, Baron Kane.
And tonight we have a new guild member. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Ryan.
I'm Ryan Seguin. I'm a network vulnerability researcher, which just means I'm a hacker that Googles shit all day. But I also ran my own tabletop nerdy geeky podcast for a couple of years called the Play Better Podcast.
Thanks for coming on.
Happy to be here. Talking about the end of the world. That's like my favorite fucking genre of sci-fi. So
Me too.
Yeah, Baron brought up this as this week's topic, and I immediately thought of you. So I was like, yeah, we need to get him on for this episode.
Sweet. I'm happy to be here.
But we're happy to have you.
So let's jump right into it. So
this very, very topical topic.
Yeah, we're all quarantined anyway. Let's talk about what might happen the next couple of months.
Yeah,
so let's we got movies, we got video games, we got books. So what's your favorite piece of post-apocalyptic media? Like when you think post-apocalyptic, what's the first thing you think of?
Books. It's always been. I mean, books are always going to probably be my favorite form of media. And then with post-apocalyptic being my favorite genre, now I guess I'm not as saturated as I could be in the genre, but I've read some pretty good stuff, I think.
So what particular book or series do you immediately jump to?
It would be S.M. Sterling's Emberverse series. I love that series. It gets a little dry later, like maybe a few books in, but oh man, the first 3 books are great. I love them. Love them. Also, the companion saga in Dragonlance. Now, a lot of people don't know, but Dragonlance is a post-apocalyptic fantasy game. And I never really thought about it, but I realized why I latched onto it so hard, because it is a post-apocalyptic game. And they did a whole book series before I even played D&D. I read these books. So, yeah. Those are 2 book series I immediately latch onto. Even though there's more, those are the 2 I immediately latch onto.
Sure. Ryan, how about you? What's your first piece of media you think of when you think post-apocalypse?
Man, it's really hard to say because like I feel like I want to break it down into so many different subgenres, but like the first thing that I jump to is going to sound weird, I'm sure, but books like Fahrenheit 451 or 1984, where society is still going, but the upheaval and change, the apocalypse as it were, was so drastic that the state of life for those people at that point is unrecognizable.
I completely count dystopian in this genre.
Yeah.
It's the end of the world as we know it. With the Fahrenheit 451, that it changed completely.
Yeah, and the one of the things that I love about that book is that it ends with, a nuclear holocaust. Like the very end of the book is the whole world blowing up while everybody was sitting at home watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, post-apocalyptic media it means so many different things depending on who gets their hands on it. Because like it can sometimes just be a vehicle for someone to do something crazy. Like Marvel, for example, will have characters like fucking Cable come back from a post-apocalyptic future, not because the apocalypse was important, but because Rob Liefeld wanted a dude with a badass robot arm and giant guns. And he was like, well, there was robot apocalypse in the future, so that's why he has that stop asking questions. But then like Marvel was forced to keep following that up and revisiting his future and being like, I don't know. It's like Liefeld likes belt pouches and giant guns, man. Why do we have to keep touching on this? Like, because Technovirus and somebody wanted to write fan fiction about that. And then they got hired at Marvel. So now they're writing official fiction for that.
That's awesome though.
Yeah. And then, you get like Terminator 2, which is very like it digs into the post-apocalyptic element at the beginning, and then how that sort of melded into the modern day, like you're leading right up to the apocalypse. But then, you have stuff like Mad Max, where, well, Road Warrior, because Mad Max was the first one was barely even post-apocalyptic. But
that was like mid-apocalypse, right?
Yeah,
like as it was happening.
Yeah. That first movie is like, oh, by the way, shit's real, but for the next 90 minutes, you're just going to watch people race cars. I hope you really like watching people race cars. And then, Road Warrior is fucking great, but it's
great.
But that's when you start getting into like what I think a lot of people think of when they think of post-apocalyptic media, where it's like there are no more societal rules. So what do humans act like when there are no rules left?
Right.
Do they create them? And then a lot of people will use that a lot of writers will use that to explore sort of human nature outside of a society. And then you can go in a million different directions from there.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Dragonlance, which, fuck yeah, Dragonlance.
Fuck yeah, Dragonlance.
One of my favorite recent role-playing game developer is Free League, and they started off their first RPG with Mutant Year Zero, which is a tabletop RPG where you are all 20-year-old mutants. You start off with what is essentially the mall from Dawn of the Dead. And they're like, or, you're in a giant office building, or you're in a dilapidated ship or whatever, but it's like you're rebuilding society.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of do like a civilization style tech tree, where you as the players have to like contribute to rebuilding your own personal society, and you have a population count, and the GM is rolling to see how many people die every day. And like you have to all work together to make your community stop dying of famine and disease and all that. And they pivoted from that, and they did a fantasy game with the same rule set, where there was just recently a demonic apocalypse where there were like nuclear winter style demon swarms that were just constantly everywhere, and people had to live in basically bunkered cities. And now that just recently ended. So what do you do?
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I love stuff like that. Like, hey, it was a medieval apocalypse. It's medieval level, tech level, but there's no infrastructure for trade. What do you do? So I love that shit.
Yeah. I think
this is why I was gonna get you guys both on and just let you.
Oh yeah. We could probably keep talking.
I do not have the post-apocalyptic knowledge that you guys do.
Shocks.
When I think of post-apocalypse, I think Fallout. I played much more Fallout 3 than any human being should. I beat Fallout 3 without firing a gun outside of the tutorial. So I played a lot of that game. And then, Mad Max, like you said, Fury Road's probably one of my favorite movies of all time.
I love that movie.
Oh, yeah. And then, the mainstream stuff. Like, I know Book of Eli and I Am Legend and, all the zombie stuff, Dawn of the Dead and all that good stuff. But, yeah, I can't touch anywhere close to what you guys are.
Well, I mean, zombie films are a fantastic bit of nerd media, because they got huge. And I'm a giant Romero fan. I don't know about you guys, but I've probably watched the original trilogy, like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead 1,000 times. Night of the Living Dead is probably still my favorite, like the original black and white, just because of the way that ends. Because there's humans still way outnumber the zombies by the end of that first movie. Everything is still kind of fine. That whole movie takes place inside of someone's house.
Mm-hmm.
The one survivor gets shot in the face at the end because the other survivors that were clearing the zombies out of the town thought he was a zombie because he poked his head out the window.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of social commentary in that shot to the face as well, but
oh yeah.
Notice it was the only black guy that got shot in the face, which was by design, I'm sure. He was saying something very poignant with that, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And
which was, oh man, way before its time too. He was saying something strong with that scene alone, and had to be subtle about it, or he would have been drugged.
Yeah, well, I mean, it came out in the 60s, so it's right in the middle of the civil rights movement. So, a lot of post-apocalyptic media reflects the fears of its time. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right that there was a lot of social commentary there because every decade we get new post-apocalyptic media. Like we were talking about Terminator earlier, and that was the fear of the machine. Like people started that the internet existed, but it was only for businesses at that point. But everybody absolutely believed that eventually machines would rise up and destroy us.
Right.
And I mean, nowadays we all know that machines are made by people, and we can't get fucking video chats to work when we need them. So, you know, they're never going to outsmart us because we're the ones making them.
Well, that wasn't topical or anything, was it?
So there's pretty much no such thing as post-apocalyptic media without some sort of social commentary, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Obviously, you can make like, you know, trash fiction or whatever when like, you know, it's not really about anything, and like, you know, they just have a concept and they're like, oh, here you go. But most of it has some sort of social commentary weaved into it, right? Do you think what we're going through right now, which depending on when people hear this, obviously I'm talking about the COVID-19 thing, do you think that will unleash any sort of post-apocalyptic media because of it?
Yes. Literally was just talking about this. We were talking about how I don't want to say excited, but we're interested to see what kind of TV shows, what kind of movies, what kind of books this whole situation spawns.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, biological fear is something that gets touched on a lot. I can't count the number of times I've read or watched something where when they talk about society breaking down, somebody will at least pay lip service to a plague in and amongst other societal factors. They'll be like, oh, yeah. And by the way, there was rampant sickness and disease because there are so many people now that a small thing that would have only affected a tiny community in the middle of nowhere 500 years ago is always a new plague. And I mean, we've had modern ones. I mean, they usually are zombie films. It's usually stuff like 28 Days Later, because that movie was about biological fear, viral fear, more so than the zombies because of how quickly it turned people. Because usually the zombie film was always about like, oh, it's going to take hours. You know, it was more about watching the slow deterioration of death. But you get into the 28 days or 28 weeks movies, and it's like, oh no, somebody coughed on me. I'm a zombie now. Instant. Fucking. You just go from zero to murder in a second. I am always like the most horrific scene in 28 Days Later is the one where that guy has the blood drop in his eye.
Oh my God. That kills me too. Again, like seeing it now, being a dad now, seeing that scene, screw that scene.
Yeah. There's are some times where it also turns into like a bit of empowerment, because we were talking about Mad Max. And like one of the interesting things, I was reading an article about this when both the Mad Max tie-in game and Fury Road came out, that you'll notice there are a lot of what would be traditionally disabled people in Mad Max, but it is never a hindrance.
Yeah.
Like everybody in that setting has some sort of deformity to the point where it's become normal, and it's kind of become a society where everyone gets to define their own usefulness after the end of the world.
It's funny too, because I legit never thought of that before. Like I never even looked at it that way because everybody was functioning perfectly fine. And it's like, you know, Charlize Theron didn't have an arm. You know, the one dude was hooked up to a respirator essentially, you know, and it's like, I never even thought about that. The most powerful people there were people with what would be considered today a disability.
Yeah, I mean, Fury Road, the main thrust of the bad guy was to try and have a son that didn't have physical deformities.
Right.
Which is like 10 that, oh my God. I mean, we could talk about that movie. That could be this whole podcast, but I mean, like 10 levels of fucked up. But yeah, like that, there post-apocalyptic stuff always digs into fears and then like also empowerment. Because like you mentioned Fallout, Rick, like,
yeah.
Have you played the first two?
I have dabbled, but like I haven't actually beaten them. So like I don't really have the whole story of the first two.
Gotcha. So the first two are very different tonally from all of the Bethesda ones. I mean, the second one was just like, how many Simpsons references can they fit into a video game? But it also really got into like every corner you turned was another moment of social commentary. You know, that's why they would have like the sentient super mutants, which you saw again in New Vegas. In fact, the if you played New Vegas, the one sentient super mutant dude up on the mountain that greets you is one of the followers from 2. and stuff like that. And like his whole arc is about being essentially terrorized and outcast, but then the ways in which being an outsider empowered him in a world that didn't really have outsiders anymore. And that's kind of what Fallout was until Bethesda got their hands on it, and then it turned into, look, I like Fallout, but it turned into, you know, Sims with rebar.
See that?
Uh,
Yeah.
um,
especially after 3. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some of that in 3, but like, you know, like 4, you know, when like you could start building bases and everything like that, they added all that. Yeah, I could absolutely see it just being Sims. What really got me with Fallout personally, I guess you could say a lot of the post-apocalyptic things that I had seen up into that point, and for me, that was just zombie movies, and like I said, films like Book of Eli and Mad Max and things like that, is I felt like when I was, you know, taking in those pieces of media that like if I were be completely helpless in those moments. And it's like you said, empowerment. You know, Fallout 3 made me feel empowered when I played that game, and in any way that I wanted to be empowered. Like it wasn't just like the strong guy that was empowered, or just like, you know, the guy who could run really fast. I mean, like you could take that game and make yourself just a super intelligent guy, and you could survive the post-apocalypse in that game just by being really intelligent by the way you played it. So it really showed, depending on how you wanted to play, the different ways that a person with that skill set could and would survive.
Yeah, and I think that's the best part about just post-apocalyptic games in general, is it lets you live out that, I don't want to say desire, but the fantasy of being able to survive through that situation, you know?
Sure.
And just Fallout is just I think probably one of the better games to do that, because it's a role-playing game and you can adjust your stats and get better over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I'm trying to think of like what other games like don't necessarily dig into the empowerment aspect of like the post-apocalyptic element, because I mean any game, I mean games are hard because a lot of people like to feel like they were winning. A lot of people won't enjoy a game if they don't get to feel better by the end of it in some way, shape, or form. This War of Mine, which is kind of one that I think of, but that's actually based on a real world war, and that's one where you're basically like just a civilian inside of this small town while it's being bombed and having to live through constant shelling.
Ooh.
And one of the interesting things about the game is that like, you know, one of the like in order to gamify it, they had to make it extremely unrealistic, because they had to make it so that like you had to constantly wonder about whether or not your neighbors that you come across were going to betray you or help you and that sort of thing. Like, you know, if you got a gun, do you shoot them for their supplies, or you know, do you do the humane thing and all that? And one of the most interesting bits of commentary I read about that game afterwards was somebody that actually lived through that specific conflict was like, none of us hurt each other. They're like, I lived in this town when this whole thing happened for this game you made, and there was never a single point of conflict between those of us that lived there. Like, if you were going to represent this realistically, if this wasn't a game, there was no conflict. Everybody band together to help each other. It was like we were all family at that point. And like that was really interesting to sort of see somebody live through essentially an apocalyptic situation and be like, no, don't, like, take the guns out of it, because once things got that dire, we all realized the only way we were going to live is if we all work together. Like, take the violence out of it, because there was already too much.
Wow.
And you know, you start to we've seen that throughout history, because the one thing that I can think of, like historically speaking, that we're like worldwide we've had an apocalypse was the Bronze Age collapse, which unfortunately we don't have a whole lot of information on, because not a lot of countries were keeping written records at the time. But there's a lot of analogs for that today, and it's actually something that we worry about with things like you were talking about with like COVID-19, where the thing that made the Bronze Age fall apart was the fact that you had a bunch of people who were integral to the society's function across multiple different countries. And the only way in which that the societies benefiting from the trade of bronze worked was because they had these specialists. Like, you know, being literate was essentially the equivalent to having your doctorate. So in order to have, and like all these people were dependent upon the written word to trade. And like those people would die because there was an illness, or no one trained the next group of scribes, so you didn't have people that could communicate. And like we worry about that with things like COVID-19, with like, hey, are we going to have enough, say, sanitary workers that keep things running? Are we going to have enough people to keep the digital infrastructure running? And then like you see that then in a lot of media where like you talk about with Fallout, like getting back into games, like your character, you can be really smart and you can be like, don't it, like they give you fantastic dialogue options where your character can be like, stop drinking irradiated water, you ding dongs. And people will be like, why? Like the NPCs have very legitimate human reactions to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. How can water be bad for you? And like, yeah, that happens a lot. Like people forget things. Like the loss of knowledge is also huge in a lot of media. Oh my God, what's that one where the guy wakes up in the future and people are watering their plants with Gatorade?
Oh, Idiocracy.
Idiocracy, yeah.
To me, that counts.
Oh no, it does. Oh, 100%.
Like when the dude's like, guys, there's salt in Gatorade, and they're like, but you know, it's
what
a
plants crave.
but it's what plants crave. But it's a comedy, but it's absolutely apocalyptic when you have to have one dude that has to be like, this is just, and it's just common knowledge for him because it was institutional, you know, for public education. But when that falls down, when that's no longer a thing, for whatever reason, when the apocalypse wasn't bombs, when it was just humanity taken to its wildest extreme, you know, South Park became real. And then,
Yep.
man,
Ah.
I'm trying not to steal the spotlight here. I realize
No.
I'm just going.
Oh my God. Did I not tell you that I'm just going to let you carry this when we start? Oh man. Oh man. We're doing a good job jumping everywhere, I think, on this. Wow, we even hit the Bronze Age collapse. That's great.
Sorry, I was like, man, what's a like? People don't think that we've ever been through one. Like, I don't ever.
Oh my God.
But
the Black Plague. That was a friggin' apocalypse right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even on a smaller scale, you look at Vesuvius. I don't care what anybody says. That was an apocalyptic situation. It wiped out a world essentially.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And changed the world for that matter.
Yeah, you could look at any conqueror, like anybody who took over a large enough piece of land, and that was an apocalypse to the people they were conquering. Alexander the Great, the Huns,
collapse of Rome.
Yeah,
the collapse of Rome alone. The end of the Ice Age, I'm sure, was while it may have got things better, was still the end of a world. It was the end of a way of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was oh God, I'd have to look up the article on this, but like there was apparently either a plague or a war that ripped its way across all of North America before Europeans set foot on the continent, and it had such a, and like we know this from scientific record, that like it had such a huge impact on like tree growth in North America that it caused a miniature ice age in Europe. And this was in, I want to say, like the 14th or 15th century, that like that we have, like we figured that out from North American arboreal records, that all of a sudden there's like a whole bunch of these trees that all of a sudden just started growing at the same time because there were no longer people living all at once. And yeah, you get like, thinking of ice ages, there's a bunch of other, I'm trying to think of, you get like Frostpunk. I don't know if you guys have played that new PC game where like, oh man, you want to play some post-apocalyptic shit. That is
the one that's in Russia or set in Russia.
I don't know where it's set.
Okay.
I've played it and I don't know where it's set, but essentially the whole idea is that like the entire world has collapsed into an ice age again. And so it's kind of like playing Civ, but you also have to like you're just keeping the last city of humanity alive in the middle of an ice age.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's got that it makes like, hey, you're the mayor of the last city. What do you do? That game's awesome. I'm trying to think of like comic books and movies. Judge Dredd.
Fuck yes. Can we just talk about just Dredd? Maybe not Judge Dredd. If we're talking about the movies. The comic we could talk about all day, but.
Okay, so not to interrupt you two, Ryan and Baron, I know I said I would let you guys go, but we have another guild member who just came into the guild hall tonight. Everybody say hi to guild member Kat.
Hi, everybody.
You told me to say hi to her.
Yeah, well, I'm over enthusiastic.
No, you're a guild member, so you have to say hi to you as well.
Hi, me.
There you go.
So I believe you guys were talking about Dread
Kickboxing.
specifically.
Oh yeah, that's where we were.
Oh
No,
dear
well,
God.
Judge Dredd, I think he was going in direction of the comics.
Oh, well, I mean, the movies, the comics, the video game.
They are all exercises in British absurdity of dystopia.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure they would qualify as post-apocalyptic, just because they're taking one aspect of British literature to an unquestioned extreme rather than an actual apocalyptic event.
Well, it is. There are like nuclear apocalyptic sites in canon everywhere. That's why the megacities are what they are.
I suppose, but I wouldn't really count that as oh, everything's over, we got to start over again. It's just, oh, that could happen to you, you're screwed.
I think we've already established. I know you weren't here for the first part of the cast, Cat. We've already established that anything that is the end of the world as you currently know it, and your entire life, we're basically lumping in this thing. Not that we had to paint with that broad of a stroke in order to fill our time, but hey, we're just letting you guys go.
We're shooting for 4 hours.
All right, so then you are lucky I came in here, because Joseph Campbell expounded upon that in a different way in the hero's journey. So I don't know if y'all understand the basic structure that he laid out. He had problems of his own, but he had a good point about the philosophical structure of stories, of heroes' tales, wherein you have the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, et cetera, and they always involve a great change, whether it's in the world or the character at large. It didn't really matter, but there was always almost a self-apocalypse that came through. Oh, what is the term that he used? That is the name of one of my favorite tracks on the Journey soundtrack. Apotheosis. So apotheosis and apocalypse are very closely related in that something must die or change in order for things to be seen in a new light. Arguably, every story is an apocalypse.
Fair.
That's true.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I brought the library down.
I mean, that's it. That's the end. There's our closer right there.
Well, so to expand on that, if you go with apocalyptic themes, and I heard Ryan mention earlier, because we are one room away from each other, mentioned earlier that apocalypses are also reflections of culture. He may not have said that specifically, but that certainly came to mind during your discussion. And I think it's important to note that not only is it a reflection of modern fears, it's a reflection of modern values. What do we value? What do we hold precious? What is at stake? And for some, it's independence versus community. For some, it's general health. A lot of zombie films pit themselves as the brave independent person versus the blind masses. If you boil it down, like the I can't remember which film, but the one that took place in the mall, the Romero film. Thank you. Dawn of the Dead, taking place in the mall, was supposed to be a big, anti-consumerism, but it's also a big, consumerism also saved them. Like, they lived in the freaking mall.
And it was the bikers that were the bad guys at the end.
Yeah, and it's funny because that ends up being a reflection of, we have ills in this society, we have mindless consumerism, and the apocalypse should change that. But in reality, it's the brutality of violence that's inherent in angry groups of people. Mindless consumerism is slightly less dangerous than jerks with chains. That's the real message of that apocalypse. But I think it's important to remember the philosophical bent of apocalyptic stories, not just illustrating what we fear, but because, zombies can also be like, we fear disease, we fear human contact, we fear blood, we fear a whole lot of this stuff. But we value things, okay, so to relate it to a current event, it's not that we value toilet paper.
Of course.
Well, I do too, but we value the comfort, we value the sanitation, and we value the media that has told us that toilet paper is going to be hard to find when the apocalypse comes. And we value this sanitation. We value this comfort. We value the reliability of having more than what we need. We're not just fearing running out. We value having it. And I think it's an important thing to remember, especially as I've been telling people, there's a plague on, so we need to be careful how we look at it. Otherwise it'll grind us down. Oh, I forgot to go over some of my qualifications. I promise I have them.
We don't.
I also that's fair. I also participated.
Really.
That's fair. I also participated in the Play Better podcast for a few years. I was logistics. I also did the camera work when we went broadcast live. I also read too much, as you all can tell, and I host a Twitch stream that explores concepts and ideas behind horror gaming and video games specifically.
I would like to point out that our 2 new guild members, especially based off of the qualifications that we threw out in the first episode, are immensely more qualified than the guild masters.
Now, mind you, it's been a couple of years since we did it, so we're out of date.
It's okay. It just means we know how to recruit. That's all that is.
Exactly.
Oh. Real leaders don't do. They know how to get people to do. I don't know.
Darn Skippy.
You have fantastic executive functioning skills.
So, Kat, I asked everybody else, what is your favorite piece of post-apocalyptic media?
So going with the current definition of apocalyptic, it is a toss-up. It is a toss-up between Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and Silent Hill.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
So it's funny. I actually first saw Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome in high school in a comparative religions class, because they wanted to talk about how a religion developed over people, getting lost out of, falling out of a plane, et cetera, et cetera. I just mostly remember Tina Turner, Master Blaster, and kids getting sucked into sand dunes. So, but
that's enough to like something.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of cool how they had the guy with the Geiger counter. Oh, what's a little fallout? Going over the water.
Nothing wrong with a little fallout.
Thank
you. Beginning of that movie. God, I love that line.
I thought it was a little overwrought that these kids, their parents were the ones that were alive before the apocalypse, and they suddenly developed this bizarre religion. But kids are weird. I love them, but they're weird. But I thought it was cool that they designed an entire town that ran on pig shit. I thought it was cool. Thunderdome was pointless. I know. The actual Thunderdome was pointless. The rest of the film was where it was at.
The point of the Thunderdome was that it was the Thunderdome. It defined itself.
I would like to say too that the Thunderdome had many points.
Yes, it did. All right, I'll take it. I'll take that.
I think I hurt Rick.
Well, wasn't the title Beyond Thunderdome anyway? I mean, you say that. It's kind of like they know.
Are we ever going to get beyond the Thunderdome? Really?
And we did. We did.
I mean, that's kind of, I think they knew when they made that the good parts of it were what's outside the Thunderdome, since they named it Beyond Thunderdome. It's look beyond the Thunderdome in the movie, and
right. But if you name something Thunderdome, come on.
Fair.
Oh,
Fair.
golly. Okay, but Tina Turner made it. I would. That's how I'm going to dress for this coming apocalypse, by the way. I sew and I do some cosplaying. And that may be, I know there's been the meme going around of, please dress according to your genre when you go out to the grocery store. I'm like, my genre isn't there. It is Tina Turner running Bartertown. And I need, giant 80s shoulder pads with the chainmail draped on them. Not actually functional, but, draped on them in cases. And the fantastic hair and headpiece. That's a must. An absolute must.
Yeah, Tina Turner was an entire mood, as the kids are saying nowadays.
Oh, God. She could be in the mood all day.
Check.
So to pivot to a completely different something just popped into my head, especially now that Kat is here, about post-apocalyptic stuff. Something that I know is
Should I be concerned that I inspired this thought process in my husband?
Yes.
Okay.
Because SWAT cats Go.
No, God, no, don't. It's perfect. Don't touch it. Never watch it again. It's perfect in your memory and leave it that way.
They're
Oh.
cats that work in a junkyard after the end of the world, and they're fighting a warlock from the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
Okay.
With
yeah,
a fighter jet.
Made
I
out
would
of
say that
junk.
definitely counts.
Yeah.
Post-apocalyptic for sure.
Well, actually, I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about things that like people don't think of post-apocalyptic, but obviously are.
Go.
Adventure Time.
Yeah, Adventure Time. Oh man, that show.
Loves it.
Mathematical.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It took me a long time because at first I was like, this is the perfect surrealist adventure show ever. I don't want anything to be different. And the only thing that was different was like, oh, it's post-apocalyptic. This is even better.
Yeah, that just kind of made it for me. It was already good. Yeah, like you said, it was already good. And then they added that little aspect of it. It's like, oh, the Great Mushroom War. Whoa.
Like, whoa. Whoa. Also, Lady Rainicorn's English voice is hilarious. It's the best.
Oh yeah.
The old man voice as opposed to speaking Korean. Oh, but
which I think Lady Rainicorn is also BMO.
yeah, I think
I'm
so.
not
I think you're right.
mistaken,
I think the same voice actor anyway.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Well, and it was and every morning when I'm like, sweetie, what do you want for breakfast? He's like, I want bacon and pancakes. I'm gonna bacon pancakes, making bacon pancakes. It's just, we don't have
I've
to
become for bacon pancakes. Like when my nieces and nephews come over, like if they're having breakfast, they want me to make them bacon pancakes because I sing the song and I cook bacon pancakes.
Heck yeah.
That's awesome.
I think Adventure Time is one of the more unique takes on the post-apocalypse because it doesn't focus on scarcity, which, going back to what I was talking about with values and fears, it focuses on adventures which are possible after an apocalypse. Like, that's what the show values. The show is valuing that time, that experience that opens up when all of previous conventions have been knocked down. Like, if you don't have a job, if you don't have to go to school, if you don't have things that were previously in place, you can go on crazy adventures with your shape-shifting dog friend. Like, woo!
I think it's a big difference between two different types of post-apocalyptic things. I mean, like, you've got the post-apocalyptic where everybody's still focusing on what it was like before the apocalypse and trying to get back to that. And then you have one where people have accepted that the change has come and are rolling with the new changes and kind of building their own new world with these new changes rather than focusing on getting back to the old world and the way things were. You focus on the new world and the things you can do now and the differences there. And I think if you ever want to move on from a survival mode, you have to embrace the new changes and the new world you can make rather than trying to get back to the old world.
Definitely. I think that's a really important that's a really important distinction, like more than genre. I think that's a more important distinction between post-apocalyptic films and post-apocalyptic media. Is like, what is the focus on? Like, are you set and determined to rebuild the old world, or are you focusing on what you can do now and how you can improve and what you can leave behind?
I mean, you basically just described the entirety of the.
There were 5 of them, weren't there?
Oh yeah, God, I've seen them all. You want to ask me anything about the original Planet of the Apes? I like the bad ones.
Yeah, but do you love the Planet of the Apes musical from The Simpsons?
Yes.
Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius.
Yeah.
Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius.
And we were talking about Fallout earlier. The children of Adam actually come from the Planet of the Apes. The second movie is entirely about the cultists, the humans that were left that worship the bomb.
Okay, that's a question.
Yep. Yeah,
okay.
It is 100% Planet of the Apes reference.
Okay, so that's a question, actually. What do you guys think about the prevalence of cults specifically in post-apocalyptic media? I know a lot of times it's supposed to be commentary on religion, but I think it's interesting that, like, cults specifically come up. Like, weird requirements, weird practices, like, even stuff that you're like, that would be odd even in a normal setting.
Well,
Like,
honestly, what's the difference between a cult and a religion other than the social acceptance?
I think with a lot of these films in particular, they emphasize the well, human sacrifice is usually the common one.
Usually, that's a very good question. It's usually that there's no upside to a cult.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they think there is, right? I mean, like, which that's the thing about religion too, is they think that there's an upside to it. They think that, so like if you're in cult, let's take the children of Adam, for example. I mean, they think that, like, the bomb is going to bring them happiness and salvation and everything like that. So like they think there's an upside.
Sure. I mean,
Sure.
man, like apocalyptic cults.
Yeah, so actually it's funny because number of major religions are currently accepted in Western colonial regions. So anywhere from Germany west are apocalyptic. A lot of major religions are apocalyptic. Like the apocalypse is coming, it's almost here, you better be good, somebody's watching. And like, but in post-apocalyptic films, these cults are, they have a lot of the apocalyptic trappings, like a lot of the, hey, shit's gonna get worse. But the main drivers behind them are like, oh well, the rains aren't coming, so we're going to pray to you, we're gonna sacrifice some blonde bimbo and make sure that the rains come. Like it's strange that whenever a cult's involved in a movie or a media, it's super heavy-handed. Like it's never like, oh, it's a little odd that you think that crabs are your Lord and Savior, but okay. No, it's definitely like, crabs are our Lord and Savior. We must sacrifice you to the crabs. All hail the crabs.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm going a little too off the rails here, but like the way I look at it is, like I said, the only real difference between a cult and a religion is social acceptance. Now, we've already discussed that most of this post-apocalyptic media is social commentary and has a lot of things to say. So if you look at a lot of the people who are making these movies, maybe they either don't like religion or they're part of a mainstream religion. And they're either trying to say, one, that religion is bad in general, or two, any religion that isn't my religion is bad. And then, like, all of these other ones are evil. And so a lot of the times the cultists are the bad guys. I mean, me personally, this could just be beyond my lack of knowledge, but I don't think I've ever seen a good religion or a good cult from a post-apocalyptic movie unless if it was a religion that existed before the apocalypse. So like the Book of Eli, for example, what I mean? He's trying to deliver the Bible across, the world, and he's the good guy because he's trying to deliver the regular religion rather than trying to start a cult.
Yeah. So to answer two of your points, the interesting thing in the way that post-apocalyptia examines cultism as opposed to, say, something like Lovecraft mythos or whatever, what they do with cults, because in that in stuff where there is actual magic, the cults are usually like just straight up worshiping evil. But in post-apocalyptic media, like especially the children of Adam, the commentary on it may be that, like, if anyone had foreknowledge, they wouldn't be in this cult. Like, we as the viewer know that the bomb is bad, right? Like, we know that because we have foreknowledge. Like, and that could be a commentary on religion. Like, if you went back before the creation of Christianity, because there was absolutely thousands of years of human history where it didn't exist.
Sure.
And if you were to just be like, if you were to be a person in that time, it would feel like that. And it could be like, well, what are these people talking about? Like, this is brand new. This obviously can't be real. If this was supposed to be the way things were this whole time, we would have heard about it thousands of years ago. And that's, I think that's the comparison that things like the Children of Adam are trying to draw. But the other, what was your other point? I got so deep into that one, I just realized I forgot.
Difference between a modern religion and a cult is nil.
Oh, no, thank you. That helped. The depiction of a positive cult, I Am Legend, the original novel, none of the movies except for kind of, so since we're talking post-apocalyptia, and this is one of the most remade bits of post-apocalyptic media ever. I think there's like fucking 4 different versions of the movie, all based on the book. In the original book, the main character is the bad guy. and he keeps seeing the vampire religion as these like things that need to be burned out, right? And it turns
Mhm.
out at the end of the book that he is the legend. He's the boogeyman because they're the people that evolved and changed with the apocalypse. He represents the old world, and he's going and killing all of the people that have adapted simply because he feels he has to violently maintain the status quo. And so like
Okay.
they wear robes and they have like a religious practice to sort of help them societally cope, because like thinking of like very, very positive impact of religion, especially like we're local here in Baltimore. We have like say the Sinai Hospital, and they have a fantastic children's center, and they're extremely Jewish, and you know they've like it's an amazing outreach in the community. And so like that's one of the ways,
Absolutely.
once a religion has been around for a while, you know, human nature start to kind of divorce the dogmatic elements from it and create something out of it. And I Am Legend was about that. It was like these people kind of created this societal religion around the way in which they changed. You know, we're vampires now, period. But we don't have to like drink blood, or we can do it ethically. And, you know, they had their own societal rules about it. But yeah, the main character, the one human, was destroying them. He was the bad guy. And you don't find that out until the end. And that's the one time I can think of where there's like a representation of like I guess you could say a cult, because they're very small. But you know, post-apocalyptic religion in media that was positive, that like the guy destroying it was the bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that we've delved into that easy topic, it's just it's funny because like I think, you know, I come from a very interesting, bizarre background, religiously speaking, and oh boy, handful of everything. And I think so from an outsider's perspective, I was not raised in the mainstream religion, so I have a really strange perspective on this, but it's always a reflection both on the subject that the creator is talking about and a reflection of the creator when they depict a cult a certain way. And it's always interesting because the cults always are like, oh, we've picked up the old ways of worshiping animals and other stuff. And I'm like, that's a little heavy-handed, but okay. Then I find that you can sort of split the cult depictions again along the lines of not only like other religions are bad, or like, you know, religion itself is bad. It's more along the lines of people who think differently than I do in certain ways, like differently than the creator does in certain ways, are these kinds of cultists. And people who think differently than the creator in other ways are those sort of cultists. And you end up with, you know, you have the blind follower cultists who have no idea what's happening. And then you have the really scary cultists who actually know what's happening and are okay with it. Like they're the cultists who are like, oh no, the atom bomb is perfect, we will all be joined. And then you have the cultists who are like, yeah, we are going to sacrifice the youngest girl in the village for our corn to come. Like, yeah, I'm okay with that. And I think those are reflective of not only of the creator's views, but of the creator themselves. You're always gonna learn more about the person creating the film than you will about what they're talking about.
Makes me think of Dead Space.
You always have to give
So
a character motivation as well. I mean, like if you're writing a
Mhm.
story, a game, you know, whatever. If you're writing anything, you always have to give a character motivation, and it's always really easy to give a character the motivation of "my God told me to."
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think there's, you know, and I think there's some legitimacy to linking that back to the Joseph Campbell stuff. Like Joseph Campbell, I have to clarify, like the hero's journey is not the be all end all of philosophy in storytelling, but it's really, really good for boiling things down. So I'm gonna keep referring back to it. You know, the ambiguous nature of the call to adventure, you know, the call, it's essentially the plot around the apocalypse. Like the apocalypse is never truly the point. It's always the journey around it. It's always the impetus around it. And the call to adventure could be, you know, the apocalypse has happened and you must save people because your God said so. Or, you know, the apocalypse is happening and you must, you know, kill the thing that is creating the apocalypse. Whether that's, well, it's the right thing to do, or hey, I have this religious impetus to do it. Again, that reflects more on the story's creator. But I think there are ways of depicting religion more in a more nuanced way than what's been done in a lot of apocalyptic films. Like,
Well,
Sure.
we were talking about Fallout earlier, and I want to say it was New Vegas, where you meet the ghoul pilgrims that like they very much refer to like their group leader as a prophet that's going to lead them to the promised land, and essentially what they're all trying to do is get this rocket working
Yep.
to
That
go
is new.
to get to an area that is heavily irradiated just because they're trying to escape persecution. They're like, if we go to this horrendously irradiated area, we're all immune to the effects of radiation sickness. We'll be fine. And like the main crux of that little side story is that there is a human who firmly believes he is a ghoul, and like at the end of it, you are tasked with like, do you shatter this guy's worldview to save him, or do you let him ride the rocket to what will very likely be death, because the effects of getting ghouled are like 1%,
Yeah.
And that was that, and they were focused around him as if he was a religious figure. Like that was absolutely a thing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's funny because like they're like when you get to the end of it, they're like, look, we've been humoring this guy for a really long time. He's also a scientist that knows how to work rockets. But guys, you gotta tell him that he's human. Like we gotta burst this guy's bubble, because now that we've gotten everything that we need out of him, we don't want him to die. We like him, but he's not gonna make it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of interesting because like they're not cultists necessarily. Like they didn't go like, oh, it's all for the greater good. They were like, no, like guys, we probably shouldn't kill the dude that's been helping us out. We really wish we could take him, but we're also not going to do anything to help him now that we got what we want out of him. Kind of
Right.
Another post-apocalyptic, semi-cultish. It's not a religious cult, more of like a cult of culture. Is Logan's Run? If you've seen it. Because they all worship being under 30 in a way. They
actually, and that truly is a post-apocalyptic film, isn't it? I hadn't even thought of that.
Oh yeah, I fucking love Logan Run. But like the whole like they're so afraid of being old because like they would then because they don't have because the thing that kept them going after the apocalypse, as you find out at the end of the movie, this facility that they're in can't handle like 90% of the medical issues that come with age. So their solution to that problem was to create this sort of like ascension myth around turning 30. And it was basically like, yeah, the only way in which we can keep humanity going is if everyone has kids really young and we just kill everybody at 30 so we don't ever have to deal with the moral quandary of aging. And then the whole film becomes about like, is it worth living a horrific existence if it means you get to continue to exist?
About the one with the lottery?
Wasn't that just the story, The Lottery? Am I
No.
thinking of Voltaire? I'm always thinking of Voltaire.
Lottery. That makes no. Logan's Run was different because that was just everyone dies at 30.
Yeah, everyone has a hand gem that goes off at 30.
No, there are plenty of post-apocalyptic stories with the lottery, though. I mean, like, or their version of it. I mean, like, technically, you could look at
Hunger Games.
the same thing. That's what I was about to say was Hunger Games because they get chosen.
That's the most well-known one, yeah.
But I think what I was trying to think of was, the ones where people think they're getting chosen for something awesome. Like they're like, hey, I won the lottery. I can go to this awesome life. And like, I know I've seen several stories with that in it. You know what I mean? Movies, TV shows, things like that.
Doesn't Soylent Green sort of work off that?
I haven't seen it.
Okay. It's been years.
Made out of people.
I mean, so like Hunger Games is an excellent
Post-apocalyptic media.
Post-apocalyptic bit of media. I mean, I know like before we dive into it, if listeners are not aware, it is actually an entire genre that was born out of Japan first, called the death game genre. So if you are a comic book, movie, or whatever fan, if you're a nerdy enough fan to be listening to this podcast, look up death game media in if you're into anime, there's tons of it. If you're into manga, there's tons of it. If you're into movies, there's tons of it.
Battle Royale being the one that everybody quotes. I mean, like everybody says like Hunger Games is just like the American version of Battle Royale.
Yeah, I mean, Battle Royale was a comic book first. And then it got,
Arguably, the movie The Cube would count.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Cube wasn't necessarily a game though. I mean, I love the Cube. Like, holy shit, the Cube. But that was more like it's not post-apocalyptic, but tangentially related to death games for sure. But like in Battle Royale, the whole reason that, because it's Japan, it's high schoolers fighting, and
Right.
and basically that was how you graduated from high school.
Mhm.
Only one person in your class of 30 people got to graduate because there was population control. Japan was like, sorry, we have way too many people. And the only way we do this is if, we've got like 4 classes of seniors in this high school. We only get 4 graduates every period.
So speaking of Japan, and because I like making people sad, I would argue that Grave of the Fireflies is a post-apocalyptic film.
Oh yeah.
Because, like I said, I like making people sad. Because for those kids, for Japan, that was an apocalypse.
100%.
And I think it was also one of the most sensitive portrayals of personal problems during an apocalypse. Of a high school aged boy and a toddler struggling with an awful family member they didn't understand. I think, like I said, I'm here to make everybody sad, but like I had to get that out. Like Grave of the Fireflies, post-apocalyptic film, fight me.
I don't think any of us want to.
Okay, I made you too sad.
You brought up Grave of the Fireflies. Oh man, if you haven't seen it, go watch it.
So good, so sad. Don't let the Ghibli production titles fool you. It's very, very, very heartbreakingly sad.
Also thinking of like pivoting slightly to Japanese media, there's a lot of nuclear fear.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the things that we didn't see here in the States was after the end of World War II, there was so much nuclear fear, understandably so, that anybody that worked in like a nuclear power plant was vilified. It was a shameful thing to do, and so there was a lot of like 70s and 80s post-apocalyptic media, Akira especially, but a lot of live action stuff where there's a lot of fear of the bomb. But
Kurosawa's short film collection Dreams, Akira Kurosawa's collection Dreams, touches on that in a couple of the short films, and it's definitely worth watching.
You beat me to it, yeah. Where the guy was like, "Oh yeah, I was." Like they're all on the they're all on the beach of the dead, and the one dude has oni horns because he was an employee at a factory. And I mean, that's actually something they have to deal with. They're still dealing with. They have an exclusion zone. They have
around Fukushima,
right? They have a whole portion of part of Japan that they can't go to. That's like still like dangerous. It's all just everything's covered in soot and ash or dust, because like humans can't go there anymore.
It really shows a stunning juxtaposition there, right? I mean, like you look at a lot of American media, the person who is exposed to nuclear radiation or nuclear waste or things like that, a lot of times they become the hero. I mean, how many heroes in American media do we have who got their superpowers because they were exposed to some sort of nuclear radiation? And then you look at the characters over in Japan who got exposed to nuclear radiation, who actually knew what happened when people got exposed to nuclear radiation. And even when they went fantastical with it, with, like Akira and things like that, like it definitely didn't turn out well for them. They didn't become a hero. They didn't become like, definitely wasn't a good thing for them.
Yeah, and it was always horrifying results. Godzilla, if you're a hardcore nerd like me. Originally the original film was terrifying because of the nuclear fear. This monster came, and the scientists that eventually defeated him had to come up with an even worse weapon, which they didn't want to deploy. And that gets lost in the translation. Like, it's not a heroic thing that this guy finally kills the monster. It's that this guy is horrified that he came up with something worse than a bomb, worse than a nuclear weapon. And, arguably, again, arguing that, having the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, those were an apocalypse for Japan. They either had to change or get left behind after that, because, then you had the economic devastation, you have the scientific, they had to adapt or die. And part of their adaptation was, I think, a unique take in that they refuse to give up anything from the past, but they will not dwell on it, culturally speaking, in terms of their media. Like, it's not, oh, we should have all remained samurai, or we all should have remained, like, that was actually a weird offshoot that happened during World War II because of some weirdo writing about it. Like, people were sort of like, no, samurai were jerks, and then this guy showed up and he was like, no, samurai were great, and then there was, anyway. But having an apocalypse happen to them, arguably, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there are perfect examples of how humanity can rise above or recover from an apocalypse. And I think, their media spends a lot of time warning, like, hey, this can happen at any time. So, like, maybe not. Can we, like, not come up with a worse weapon? Can we not? Can we not do that?
Just for 5 minutes. Thinking of the Japanese apocalypse, in a way, one of the small things that, like, we in the West don't generally know about is that their written language changed because of World War II. They have two alphabet sets, essentially. They have two character sets, and then they have Chinese characters, but they swapped the phonetic alphabets. Like, you could think of it like hiragana and katakana are basically the same way in which we view uppercase and lowercase, are the same letters, just written differently. But it used to be that katakana was for native words because they use the same stroke and shape as the Chinese characters. Some of them are Chinese characters. And hiragana was for foreign words. It was shaped differently. It looked different. And then, as like a conscious decision to separate past Japan from modern Japan after the end of World War II, they swapped the usage of their alphabets to represent that we are different now. Like, they went through such a change. They were like, we want it to be like hard writ in documentation that if we look at something, we know when it was. Like, it was a different era. It was a different Japan because of this thing that happened.
Arguably an apocalyptic change.
Yeah, it wasn't something as simple as like, hey, we use bottle caps for currency now. But that was certainly something that was an interesting difference. I'm trying to think, like, cyberpunk, thinking of other genres, like cyberpunk would also arguably be an apocalypse.
Now listen here, chummer.
If we want to go into Shadowrun, can we just talk about Shadowrun?
Well, to be fair, I don't know a whole lot about Shadowrun, but what I was going to say was with cyberpunk, I guess it really depends on what cyberpunk media, because some cyberpunk, I guess, might look at itself as just a natural progression of technology, not necessarily an apocalypse, you know what I mean? It just happens over time. But like, yeah, if it's like, an event happened and now that event has changed the world and now we're cyberpunk, yeah, that's post-apocalyptic.
Okay, what you all don't see on the audio is that my husband's smile is slowly creeping across his face because he's like, that means Shadowrun is hyper qualified because it went through lots of those.
It did. Also, I feel bad. We're talking over you a lot there, Baron.
Yeah, we're very excited. Please speak up.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to talk over you guys.
No, I'm just saying. Well, we mentioned Shadowrun, and I feel like I saw some interjection there.
No, I was just going to say, especially with the Ghost Dance, it was most definitely a apocalyptic event.
Yeah, absolutely.
Set about by the Ghost Dance that brought about the goblinization of people. So.
Yeah. Oh man.
Okay, so Baron specifically, I don't know a whole lot about Shadowrun. Like, I've touched Shadowrun here and there. I've never actually read any of the books or things like that. Mostly, I just
played a little bit of it.
Well, yeah, that's actually why I was going to say you specifically, because you had me play in a game of Shadowrun without me even realizing I was playing in a game of Shadowrun. So, Kat, Ryan, listeners at home who don't know, who weren't there, obviously, there was a time we were all just kind of sitting around and hanging out with a bunch of friends, And Baron kind of started running a game. There was no dice involved. There was no books involved. There was no character creation involved. It's like, you are you, and this is what's happening, and let's tell a story together. And basically, we were playing Shadowrun. I had no idea until afterwards that it was Shadowrun. And basically, you could tell a little bit more about that because you know what was happening there. But it was basically like when the whole shift happened.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we were all just like it was a play yourself game, and we were all hanging out with one of the people that was playing is actually from the Pacific Northwest, and we went to go visit her home. And while we were there, it happened. The whole ghost dance thing happened, and the wave went across the land, and I had them role play what happened when it hit them, and I just randomized what happened to each person. And so basically, I had them play through the apocalypse that was all that mess.
Oh man, Shadowrun 2020.
So I like that approach. I think that's pretty cool rather than focusing on, oh hey, the apocalypse happened, but we got shit to do now.
Right.
Well, I mean, original Shadowrun wasn't as divorced from its apocalypse as later editions are, because in order to like move the editions forward, they kept moving the timeline forward. But the first 3 editions of Shadowrun were set in like 2050, so you had characters that, and with the all the stuff in Shadowrun happening in like 2012 or 2013 or whatever, it, you know, when you're only talking say 30 to 40 years after most changes, it's enough to where any of the older characters would remember it, but the younger ones wouldn't. It was actually something I had to bring up whenever somebody wanted to play an elf and they're so used to playing D&D. They're like, I'm 117 years old. And I'm like, you can't. I'm sorry,
Right.
you are not. Which was always like super interesting because like, you know, we were talking about how like, you know, belief in culture springs up around an apocalypse. Like the elves in Shadowrun are like, oh yeah, we're ancient. We can live forever. And the short distance between the magical apocalypse to the current like cyberpunk existence is so short. It's simply that no one's ever seen an elf die of old age, but they don't actually know what their natural lifespan is because they hadn't never hit it because it's so recent. Which is something I always loved about that setting. That, you know, they elected a dragon president and then he subsequently committed suicide because they elected a dragon president and that's all he needed. Trying to think.
Okay, I wanted to ask you guys more about cyberpunk stuff because, you know, I've only recently come into enjoying cyberpunk stuff because of somebody in my life. I guess part of one of my questions in the post-apocalyptic vein is that, does a cyberpunk apocalypse, like an apocalypse that creates the cyberpunk setting, does it have to be a big thing, or can it just be almost like another industrial revolution?
In terms of like the role-playing game Cyberpunk, I think that's exactly what it was.
Ah, okay.
As far as I know, there were wars and stuff, but nothing really happened that like ended the world per se. It really was just a influx of technology that changed everything, including I can't remember what it's called. Is it the Matrix? They have their own little Netrunner kind of thing.
Yeah, they called it the I think they, well, no, I'm thinking
I can't remember.
Neuromancer called it the Matrix first.
Okay.
In between monologues while holding Kalashnikovs at each other?
That's Altered Carbon, which is a different apocalypse. That's transhumanism. However, oh God, I can't remember. Just so people know, the Neuromancer books invented the term cyberspace and the Matrix for the internet.
Actually, I think between Shadowrun and Cyberpunk, I think they use each of those words, but I can't remember which one uses which.
Right. Well, Shadowrun certainly uses Matrix to represent the internet, and yeah, I mean they're all stealing from Gibson. Like he even got asked about Shadowrun. He was like, "Yeah, they're 100% using all the terminology that I invented for my books. Like, by the way, no one used those words. These aren't common parlance words until I made them." But yeah, they just threw Tolkien into my shit. Whatever, I'm cool with it. Like he literally had grounds to sue, but he was like, "Nah, whatever. I'm a cyberpunk motherfucker. People deviating from works is what I'm about. So do it."
I was gonna say he was very punk.
Yeah,
the punk was the point.
So, like, not to be that name droppy guy, but
be that name droppy guy.
when I was running my podcast, we actually got to interview the creator of Cyberpunk 2020. And the only reason that I bring it up is because it was one of the single greatest interviews I'd ever done, because Mike Pondsmith is a delight to talk to, and he, like, talking about the creation of Cyberpunk 2020 and like why he was inspired to make it, was absolutely like influenced by apocalyptic media. He had gotten into like mecha anime before Akira happened, so before anime got localized into English, and he got all of it in his hands because he was pen pals with some Japanese folks, and they wanted to see Dukes of Hazzard tapes, so he was taping Dukes of Hazzard and sending them and trading mecha anime for Dukes of
I
Hazzard.
don't know why that's so hilarious to me, but
It's
Wow.
so
That
utterly charming.
So good. And talking to him about it, he was like, there, you get these giant upheavals in time. And afterwards, like, one of the things that we were talking about that was like an inspirational upheaval that's modern is the creation of the iPhone. Think of, like, the iPhone came out in 2007. It was the first smartphone. Like, all of us are old enough to have lived through like phones having internet connection and being capable of texting, but like looking at the way that life is now, where our phones are our omni devices, and the way in which that was science fiction, hell, even like 3 years prior, that was like, oh yeah, you're gonna have a laptop that's also your cell phone. Sure, buddy.
right.
And
Right,
then,
you're not going to hurriedly panic hitting the back button so you don't accidentally activate the internet. Like,
right. And it's like, but now that's how things are. And that was absolutely the apocalypse that he was going for, in a sense, with Cyberpunk 2020. And by the way, if you are a tabletop gamer and you have not played it, Cyberpunk Red, I believe, is now out, which is the modern version of Cyberpunk 2020, and it's good shit. It is Shadowrun minus the magic, and there's a bunch of other stuff that they do, including like post-apocalyptic media. Oh, Kat, what was that one tabletop RPG that we played that we ended up calling Murder Truck?
Atomic Highway.
Thank you so much. Atomic
So-
Highway.
Listen, Meemaw was amazing with that 50 cal in the back of that truck.
There is this very thin tabletop RPG called Atomic Highway. It is just played with D6s.
It's magical.
The entire core book is probably thinner than an old D&D module.
Oh crap.
But you pick your war rig, like that's like thinking of Mad Max. Like, you as a party make your characters super quick. You design a war rig and go. And
Well,
it's
you're
just-
supposed to design individual vehicles, but we pooled our resources to make a war rig.
and it was just a U-Haul truck with a Gatling gun in the back, and like the GM, the entire job of the GM is to just give you a reason to be driving down the road and essentially play post-apocalyptic Road Rash, the tabletop game.
Every time we managed to spot a trap, we would just bang on the side of the truck, and Meemaw would pop out with this 50 cal and just gun these bastards down.
Like
We didn't even bother talking to anybody. We didn't bother investigating anything. We were just like, nope, just run them. And I think the front had flamethrowers.
right.
The front had flamethrowers, the back had
As they
Meemaw.
should. As they should.
And I mean, that was kind of like, that's another thing that we were talking about apocalyptic ridiculousness earlier, how sometimes it's just it's kind of the Ritz cracker when you're there for the cheese that's spread on it. You know what I mean? Like, what do I want? Well, what I want is to drive down the highway at 100 miles an hour because there are no more cops with flamethrowers and giant guns. What can allow me to do that? I guess bombs fell 20 years ago and nobody remembers what toilet paper is. Yeehaw, motherfuckers, we doing this shit. Right? And
That reaches back to the theme I was talking about, how it's a reflection of who created it. Like, what do you want to do? I want to drive down the highway with a souped up Segway that has, buzzsaw blades on the front because I hate traffic. Well, guess what? Have I got a show for you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And then sometimes you get tabletop games like Red Markets, where it's a post-apocalyptic zombie game, but the entire point of it is to be one giant commentary on capitalism and why, like, being poor is a cyclical, horrible thing you can never escape. So if you want to play a game with your friends, it's one of the most well-designed role-playing games ever made, but the entire point is to just dig into social commentary and be sad. Red Markets is amazing.
Yeah, I like it, and that's because I like making things that are sad, but it's tough. It's a
Yeah.
tough one. But I think it's an important piece of post-apocalyptic media in that it doesn't just dig into the fantasies of oh well, if I survive, it'll be fine. It's hey, guess what? Surviving's hard.
And
It's
like
hard.
your character wins when they reach middle class status. Is literally the objective of the game. Like, I have a stable job. I can now live without having to worry about whether or not my needs are met. This character's done. I win. Yeah. And then for people that are, we were talking about Dragonlance earlier because it's a wonderful post-apocalyptic setting. We also talked a little bit about Forbidden Lands and Mutant Year Zero for tabletop games. If people are looking for like that fantasy element, you know, you want to get away from the futurism, Dungeon World and Zombie World are also excellent examples because like Dungeon World is a game where you sort of build out as a group. So it's a lot of fun, but getting away from the core way you play it, the conceit is that the world is so broken that there are a million dungeons to explore. Like, it's also kind of Elder Scrollsy in that way, where like, oh, I found another ruin because there's a lost civilization. There's always a lost civilization, but that's apocalyptic in a way. But with Dungeon World and Zombie World, it's like, why are there so many dungeons to explore? It's because there's nearly nothing left. Because you find out, like, as you go, that like you're just constantly raiding what was, you know, your elves and dwarves and, you know, orcs and whatever, but the only reason you're surviving is because you're picking at the bones of a prior civilization.
See, now that's a question. I don't know what, I keep asking these silly questions, but like, I wonder what y'all's opinion is on dungeon delving in games. You know, is that, could you consider any dungeon delve a post-apocalyptic setting in that, you know, if the dungeon is not actively being used as a dungeon, as a prison, as a torture method, like, is it post-apocalyptic? Because that castle's gone.
It theoretically, any kind of like game where you're exploring some ruined civilization could be considered, the post-apocalypse. You're delving into the apocalypse of another civilization. Oh my god,
Slow down.
civilization.
Okay, yeah, because I think it's cool that we have a ton of media that talks about civilization, that talks about, you know, apocalypses for modern civilization. But like, you know, you mentioned the Bronze Age collapse. You know, anytime an empire falls, it's post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, a lot of those you're just not focusing on that apocalypse. So like, you know, recently, let's talk Dungeons and Dragons. They released Dungeon of the Mad Mage not that long ago for 5th edition. The Dungeon of the Mad Mage is a thriving society all on its own. You know what I mean? You have Hallister, who is, you know, running the whole thing, but you've got taverns in there and, you know, societies that are running off of, you know, just being in that dungeon. But the story of that dungeon, you know, is it did belong to another civilization before it was taken over by Hallister and turned into the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So you can kind of uncover that story if you want to, but like the whole thing is you can play that entire game and not necessarily even touch on it and just say, you know, if you wanted to run your game that way, you could just say it was built by the Mad Mage in order, just because he was crazy and that's what he did. You could ignore that, and like that technically wouldn't be post-apocalyptic, but you know, it usually is there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I think there's something kind of cool about, you know, if you do not do a randomly created dungeon where you have 2 sets of stairs leading up to another set of stairs going down, Ryan.
Look, that wasn't my fault.
That was your fault. I'm blaming you. That was a Forbidden Lands thing. But if you have a pre-made, you know, a pre-made dungeon to explore, one that you are not imprisoned in, you know, I think there's like some really cool story possibilities. Like you said, that you could either delve into or ignore depending on what your group is really into.
Right.
You know, you could get some really cool story. Like, you could have a whole story based on the kobolds that live in this dungeon that was previously made not by them, but they've taken over. Like, I think we did that in Invisible Sun? No, not Invisible Sun. Dark. We did a dungeon where there were kobolds that had taken over, and we negotiated with them, and we stole their dragon.
Oh, so that was an introductory adventure that originally came out in 3rd edition called The Sunless Citadel.
Thank you, the Sunless Citadel. That's it.
And that was reprinted in the Tales from the Yawning Portal for 5th edition. Yeah, that is
great resource, by the way. If you're looking for D&D 5th inspiration, Tales from the Yawning Portal is dope.
Yeah, the Sunless Citadel is entirely about like, hey, you're adventurers, you wandered into this place, and there is absolutely an entire underground kobold society here that has built up around the fact that nobody is in these ruins anymore. But like the entire world hasn't changed. So like trying to think of stuff where it's not just like walking into what is someone else's personal apocalypse, but rather a worldwide one.
Okay, that actually, I'll take that, because I've been looking for a spot to put this in anyway. So, Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Obviously a post-apocalypse, right? We're used to the hero winning, but the story of Breath of the Wild is the hero lost, the bad guy won, and as you explore the world, you see that the entire world was wrecked, right?
Yeah.
It's still the civilization that is surviving is still that same civilization. They don't have everything that they used to, but it's still the Hylians, you know what I mean? And
because they've adapted.
Right, the other races that live there. And then 100 years later, the hero gets awoken and gets to try again. And is one of the only people who can use the old technology to their advantage that everybody else has lost knowledge of because it's been 100 years.
Yeah, lost knowledge is a really cool recurring theme in a lot of apocalyptic media. I think that's God, I did every single one of the shrines, by the way, in Breath of the Wild. Because a certain person had bought the guide and said, I'm just gonna leave this here, if you want to find those shrines. And I'm like, completionist streak a mile wide. Oh God, why? But I think the lost knowledge aspect is so cool in Breath of the Wild mainly, but you can see that in other genres, in other post-apocalyptic things, like with Mad Max, knowing that you shouldn't drink water that registers on the freaking Geiger scale and stuff like that.
Little Rick playing PlayStation 1, Jack and the Precursor Legacy. Jack and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. That was probably my first exposure to a post-apocalyptic piece of media. And that whole thing is about lost knowledge. You don't even realize it's an apocalypse until you realize what happened to the precursors. And there's a whole all this technology lying around that the precursors left behind. And, a lot of that game is about you collecting things to get that precursor technology up and running. And as that series goes on, you find out all about the precursors and their story. I won't spoil it too much, but I love that series.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You mentioning Zelda, they like to dive into that a lot. I mean, thinking of Ocarina of Time for the N64, that was one of the really, really interesting ways in which I think that post-apocalyptic media was used, because you could go back and forth, right? If you're a kid, everything's fine. The moment that you have to go into the future, you have to keep time traveling back and forth between the hellish dark future where there are zombies in the town, and then you can take the sword out and go back and talk to the people that live there, and then put the sword in and go, and then there are zombies, and take the sword out, and then there, so on and so forth. You can keep going back and forth between everything being effed up and everything being okay. And then, of course, they split the timeline, and I'm not going to get into the Zelda timeline. It's ridiculous. Then, we were talking about Waterworld. And then, when you play Legend of Zelda, Kevin Costner, aka Wind Waker, there is a point in which they're like, by the way, this whole thing is an apocalypse. And you go to the Temple of Time from Ocarina of Time, it's submerged underwater, because they're like, Ganon submerged the world in water, by the way. And your ship, the King of Red Lions, is actually King Hylia. And like
Spoilers.
yeah, spoiler alert, the game's almost, I think the game's 20 years old.
Like we haven't spoiled pretty much everything that we've brought up today.
Right.
I mean,
but like that was like huge, because you just, up to that point, you're like, oh, this is just, there's just a lot of water in this Zelda game. It's like, nope, this is literally Ocarina of Time's apocalyptic future where you didn't win. And then like Breath of the Wild was essentially the non-water version. It was the robot apocalypse versus the Ganon-induced global warming apocalypse for Ocarina of Time. They are actually like divergent timelines of the same post-apocalyptic event in different ways, which is why for similar locations between Wind Waker and Breath of the Wild, they have the same music, because they're supposed to represent the same geographic areas under different circumstances. Like Rudo Village and Dragon Roost Island have the same music, because they're like, it's the same fucked up place.
for listeners at home to truly understand, this man has a Zelda tattoo on his leg. You know, just a fair warning, you know, that I should have given 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. And
But
man, if you then Ocarina of Time, not Ocarina of Time, fucking A Link to the Past, where
Oh yeah.
where the whole point of that game is you get to see what the world, kind of like Ocarina of Time, you know, where you get to see what the world will become if you don't do anything, and it's like this hellish demonic landscape.
Don't get me started on how Ocarina of Time is a 3D version of A Link to the Past.
I mean, it is. That's not a bad thing. It just is. But yeah,
I do have to say something that may pivot a little bit. It's still a video game though, and it's a video game where the apocalypse happens and the bad guy wins.
I'm ready.
Final Fantasy VI.
Oh, come on. Oh God. When you literally like like you lose halfway through that game and you have to play through a ruined world. God, that's so depressing. It was so sad.
I'm here to make things sad.
You're like, we're the heroes. We're gonna go save the world. Oh
We're
no.
We're here to make it sad, think about death and stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
like then the game. Oh my God. Like I could go into all of the immediate. It's like
before you do.
Yeah.
Before you do, I wanted to point out that a lot of the struggles that happen in the post-apocalyptic world in that game are so poignant because they're all personal. I think a lot of that gets lost in a lot of the post-apocalyptic, well, to put it bluntly, the post-apocalyptic porn that we get of people, you know, spiked bats and, you know, war rigs. You know, we miss that people are they just want to live. They just want to struggle. Well, they don't want to struggle, but they want to live, and they have to struggle through it. And a lot of that gets covered when the bad guy wins, and we see the apocalypse. Like, oh my God, the stories to tell are so important.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that they have you do is you're playing as Celis, and she has to fish the correct number of fish out of the poisonous barren sea so that she can give it to her adopted father. And if you as a player fuck that up, he dies. Like you can potentially kill her adopted dad. It has no impact on the story other than, well, you don't know what the right thing to do is here. You just have to hope. And you tried very hard. You did everything right, but your dad still died. And it's like, well, that's fucked up. And then you go find the samurai in the mountain who's writing the death notes to a widow because he can't bear another person through this apocalypse to have to live with the death of a loved one, that he pretends to be that loved one, sending them letters in the war front to be like, oh, I'm okay. You know, you still get to continue as though I'm just okay somewhere else. But like,
but I think I want to pivot back.
Oh, so good.
I want to pivot back and point out that I think in some of the smaller pieces in Zelda, in Breath of the Wild, you do get some of those smaller stories. And like you get that in a more positive light. Like you get like the kid that does, you know, the kid that wants to collect beetles doesn't give a fuck about Ganon. He just wants his beetles. And like you get to forget about the apocalypse for 30 seconds while you're finding him his beetles. And I think those stories are important too.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, also thinking of Breath of the Wild, like the little, if you played Ocarina of Time, the little Kokiri kids, like you got to know them Well, no. So the Kokiri kids were the little fairy people that Link thought he was at the beginning of Ocarina of Time, and you find out that the Koroks are literally like post-apocalyptic mutant versions of them.
Oh.
And that they were like, yeah, we're forest spirits, but the world was so fucked up that we can't retain a humanoid form anymore. They had to sort of like regress and become more of a part of nature because it couldn't sustain them anymore because nature was no longer whole. And that they came from Wind Waker. They were the exact same thing. They were the Koroks in Wind Waker, and it was literally because the world is no longer whole. They represented childlike innocence, but after an apocalypse, they reverted to these more fae-like creatures, these like Japanese yokai, rather than being children of the forest. And then if you find all 900 or whatever of them in Breath of the Wild, they give you a golden poop.
Aw.
Because congratulations.
Little sweeties.
But
I still need to dress up in a big green Zoom suit and just like jump out at people at MagFest and go, yeah, you found me.
given the world's dumbest puzzles to follow, like you just have the like little blocks with numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's just one of them's out of order. They put it in the right order, and then you have to jump out at them and point them an acorn or whatever. Be like,
No, like just find I find one of those compass roses at MagFest, and just like if somebody stands in the middle, I'll just jump out at them. Be like, yeah, you found me.
Are you like, hey, here's a circle of rocks, but one of them's slightly out of place. If you put it in, it's also kind of like, I get that it's supposed to be a video game convention, but if you extrapolate, like it's all like preschooler level, like rewards. Like you don't like none of them are hard. It's all just like you put the block in the space. Here's an acorn. There's 900 of us. Like they it kind of shows their natural regression. Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Naturally regressed childlike innocence.
And then maracas.
We'll expand your inventory
With maracas.
with maracas, magic maracas. The big guy dances. Keep collecting the acorns until he'll give you some poop. It's the apocalypse. Everybody needs a little. Everybody needs banana stickers.
So which media created apocalypse would you prefer to live in?
Like during or after?
Oh, well, the point of media. So let's say you choose, Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome, like you are during the time of the Thunderdome. You know what I mean?
We're
like
talking specific, not I would rather live in a book apocalypse.
Right.
You're talking
So
about like
you
like
can
what's-
pick one from a book. Yeah, it's just like you are living in that
which
media.
post-apocalyptic world. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Emberverse, totally.
tell us a little bit
I
about that.
I choose the world of Gideon the Ninth, which is an amazing novel, and it's about post-apocalyptic space lesbian necromancers
With swords.
with swords. It's so good, you guys. It's so good.
Can't forget that.
Gideon the Ninth, so good.
So before we move on, each of you tell me a little bit more about those worlds because I know nothing about them.
Baron, go.
Yeah.
First.
The Emberverse. The apocalypse happened when everything technology-based turns off. And that's including any kind of hyper-reactive chemical reaction too. So like gunpowder doesn't work, electricity doesn't work, steam works kinda. Like it almost doesn't hold it. It doesn't really hold its pressure, so you can't even do like trains or anything like that. So after that, and the dust settles because planes flying out of the sky and all the bad stuff happens. Everybody starts to kind of settle in their areas, and it centers on the Willamette Valley in Oregon. And it and this goes back to what we were talking about with cults. It kind of breaks up into cults. One of them is pagan based. One of them is kind of a twofer. It is a Catholic based, but it's also it was started by the SCA. Yes, the Society for Creative Anachronism. So they created like a feudal Europe kind of settlement, whereas the pagans had like a very it was like a festival all the time. But they kind of started their own thing. And then eventually you get to meet different cults, the other one being the United States of Boise, and they are a cult of America. They're trying to live in what is left of America, and they're trying to bring back America. But none of these cults are bad. They're all trying to save society in the vision that they see fit. Until the cult Universal Triumphant, or the Church Universal Triumphant shows up, and they are bad. They're very bad. So they finally get an antagonist there. But it's great. Not going into details, but that's essentially. Eventually, magic starts coming back too. I probably forgot to mention that. That was pretty good. Also, there's a spin-off book series, the Sea of Time. Okay, so basically, Nantucket exists, and then it doesn't. So Nantucket exists from this Nantucket disappears from this post-apocalyptic world to reappear in the Bronze Age. So everybody that was on Nantucket at that time now exists in the Bronze Age, and they exist there.
Huh.
And that's a fun read. They get to no. If you ever want to read it, please do, but I don't want to go into details because there's a lot of spoilers.
All right, that's wild.
It is wild. It's great. It is great. But they also kind of go into their own apocalypse because they go back into a world without all the resources that they had from the mainland, and now they have to survive. So, but it's a completely different kind of apocalypse than I was ever used to, and it was great. So,
all right, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I don't count that as the Emberverse, but it's the Emberverse too. So.
Okay. I just like the idea of displacing Nantucket, really.
Oh yeah, it completely gone. Oh, well, it's not completely gone. I guess the Bronze Age version of it appears in the modern time. So yeah, it doesn't disappear.
They switch places.
They switch places.
All right.
But that's also a little spoiler, but I figured I'd go ahead and throw that in there.
That's huh.
Everybody hop on the train.
Yeah, the guild train.
To briefly explain Gideon the Ninth, the apocalypse scenario there is that this is a post-apocalyptic world where there was, and bear with me now if you've heard this before, there was this emperor that was real good at what he did. But what he happened to do was death magic and had to face off with the big nasty guy and barely survived. Now, to be fair, this emperor is not hosed up to a whole bunch of machinery and is not actually a bastard.
Sounds like 40K.
I know. But everybody got split into, the schools of necromancy got split into 9 houses across 9 different planets. And essentially, you have to go through these trials in order to become super powerful and stuff. The point is that it's space, but it is also magic. It is also technically post-apocalyptic, and it is goth as fuck. And that's why I want to be there, because space goth, post-apocalyptic magic and swords. I have no deep reason for wanting to be in there. It is my aesthetic as a universe.
My answer would have to be the film Six String Samurai.
Oh, I love that movie.
I think any universe that prides itself on your ability to have badass katana swordsmanship, but also be a sick as fuck rockabilly king in what is known as New Vegas. Yeah, I need that. By the way, this predates Fallout New Vegas by a while.
Oh yeah.
And there is a lot of inspiration there. But yeah, if you haven't seen Six String Samurai,
do it.
It's one of the best films ever made.
It's sitting in my DVD collection as we speak. Oh, and to those of you that are listening, DVDs are these discs that they.
They are digital video discs.
They post-date CDs, which are compact discs.
Yes, this is back when we could own music in movies.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about you, Rick? Where'd you want to be?
Okay, I'm gonna get a lot of hate and a lot of judgment here.
I'm ready.
Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland.
What?
Yep, Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland. A lot of people don't realize Kirby is post-apocalyptic, but totally is.
What?
Well,
Kirby is one of 2 of his race that survived the apocalypse. Meta Knight being the only adult that survived, and Kirby being the only child that survived, but Kirby is not Meta Knight's child. Kirby is part of this race of things that were all exactly like him, but now he's the only one left, him and Meta Knight. And I just love Kirby because he's awesome, and like his whole world is just a lovely dreamland. Just seems like a lovely place to be all the
Okay,
time.
you're not getting hate. You're actually getting a little bit of jealousy because that's a great answer.
But would you be human Rick, or would you be like a pink balloon person?
I mean, yeah. Are you are you Waddle Rick? Are you like?
I think I'd have to be like either I'd have to be either what DDD is or like or what a Waddle Dee is, because like humans don't. Okay, let's get really into this.
Oh God.
So if you go into some of the, I think it was Kirby and the Crystal Shard, there is a planet that you visit, and it looks exactly like a frozen over version of Earth.
Oh.
And it has the same land masses and everything. Like, it is unmistakable as Earth. They don't call it Earth, but like it's Earth. So obviously Earth has already had its apocalypse. You know what I mean? A long time ago. Like
Let him finish.
So like obviously Earth has already had its apocalypse, as well as Dreamland having its apocalypse and everything like that. It's also one of the reasons that Kirby can ride stars and things like that, is because he's part of this warrior race that existed, and they had access to all of these abilities and technology and things like that that other people just can't do.
My
So
whole
obviously I
world
couldn't
is
be a
exploding right now. I've
I know,
learned
right?
so much about Kirby.
This whole time I've just been waiting to drop the Kirby bomb on y'all. Post-apocalyptic,
drop.
okay, Kirby.
Oh my God, it's a Kirby apocalypse! Like, oh my God, mind blown.
Listen, folks. First of all,
So-
Kirby exists in the way that he does simply because Sakurai wanted a character that would be easy for kids to draw. That's why Kirby exists, because he was in a simple shape, and then he'll get popular because kids can draw him. But go on, Rick.
Well,
Go
Kirby
on.
actually originally he was supposed to get replaced. Like Kirby was a placeholder character in the original game, and like they just never replaced him. He was also supposed to be yellow. But that changed too.
Well, I mean, the first.
But yeah,
one
so
was
obviously
black
I
and
couldn't be. Obviously, but in box art he was yellow and stuff. So obviously I couldn't be a human because all the humans are gone, unless I'm like the last existing human on planet Popstar, and I don't know how I got there. So like, yeah, I think I would have to be whatever penguin type creature that King Dedede is, or a Waddle Dee. Like I'd just be Rick D, you know.
Rick.
Yeah, all right.
Waddle Rick.
I was going to change my answer. If it can be happy Nintendo games that also are obviously post-Earth apocalypse, I am 100% going Pikmin.
I knew that was coming.
Because I want an army.
Are you quiet then? Are you like bigger?
No, I'm definitely from like the alien race that comes to Earth and is like, man, I wonder what happened to all these humans, and they're like, you know, a foot tall or whatever, or like 6 inches tall, but you have an army of sentient carrots that will die for you, whatever you want.
Okay, what y'all need to understand is that when Pikmin 3 came out, he sat down to play it. I went to work. I came back. He had not moved. There was a layer of dust on his shoulders. He played that game for 16 hours straight.
I like Pikmin.
I love the way that you just said that. It was so many emotions just in what you just said. There was horror, there was sadness, there was a little bit of love. I can't even digest that whole thing. I love Pikmin.
It's so good. It's so pure.
Oh my God, it's still going.
I just want little carrot buddies, and I want to collect Duracell batteries.
I see the video. He's crying.
And
Like a little, just a little.
They die for you. You did nothing. You bring them into this world only to be your soldiers, and you pick apart the remnants of a dead civilization for cash.
Oh,
It's I love those games, but like, oh man, yeah, Pikmin. If we're doing that, or
Sure.
I'm
like,
gonna have to play
Why not?
Pikmin.
or like Pirates of Dark Water. If we're gonna go cartoons,
Ooh.
because like
Wait. Well, fuck it. Thundercats then.
Oh shit! All right.
that's apt
I
because
mean, we already went SWAT cats. Might as well go Thundercats.
Well, I mean, like Thundercats was like even more of a hardcore apocalypse though, because like that's like
Literal end of world.
yeah, Transformers.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, there was like the 80s, they were like the world's coming to an end, you guys, and it is
Well-
the reason why everything is happening. Like fucking
I have
over.
thoughts on this. So I have thinky thoughts. Bear with me. So they were children's cartoons based on selling toys, but
Yeah.
like a ton of media at the time was also like, hey, look at these kids who don't have parents around, who don't have their controlling factors, who don't have the representation of society and their rules around.
Mhm. Or
Mhm.
and
Very
even,
much a theme, and that
and even-
easily translates to apocalypse.
and even getting into like the whole Thundercats thing, Lion-O, essentially a child,
Hmm.
still a child when they get to New Thundera, but in the body of a grown-up. Mind of a
Mhm.
child, power of a grown-up.
That's terrifying.
yeah, well, because he was a child, he goes into the cryo sleep, he wakes up, his body physically aged.
Yep.
And like the rest of them, it did as well, because it was like what, like 5 years, but they all went from being like 22 to 27 or whatever, so they don't look
What-
that.
Well,
any-
yeah, Wily Kit and Wily Cat were pissed because they were older than Lion-O when they went in.
Yeah, his tank was broken or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it kept him asleep and alive, but it didn't stop him from aging. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't know any of this about Thundercats.
Oh,
And
wow, yeah.
I just tuned in on Toonami. Yeah, like I did not see the beginning of Thundercats.
Oh, no,
like it was just
no, sir, not Toonami. So are you thinking of the new Thundercats, the one that looked like an anime? Was the
no.
old Thundercats
No,
on Toonami?
Yeah, they had that on
Uh,
Toonami like briefly.
Get
It
out.
was on
Wow.
Cartoon Network. I know it was on Cartoon Network. It might not have been Toonami, but it was definitely on
Okay.
Cartoon Network.
It might have
And,
been
like,
like
just-
Boomerang or something.
No, it was before Boomerang was a thing.
Oh, okay.
You're talking about the old one, the
I-
really, really old 80s.
Yeah,
weird-
like Eye of
Oh.
Thundara could be beyond sight. Thunder,
Wow.
thunder, Thundercats. Huh! Yeah, like that's how I saw Thundercats.
All right.
We went there.
Nothing you didn't deserve.
That's
It's
true.
it's
We
it's an
questioned
old
it.
code, but it checks out.
Yep. Nice. Wow.
But I roll deep. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just we can't end this podcast without talking about it. Can we talk about how Marvel Phase 3 had 2 apocalypses in it?
Well, yeah. I mean, they had to, because like
One could argue that it had multiple
there's no-
apocalypses.
There's Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the snap.
And
Yeah.
then there's the impending apocalypse after undoing the snap when you
Yeah.
don't have the infrastructure to support all of those people anymore.
Yeah, think of all those people that were born in the meantime.
yeah,
Mm.
well, the world went from having 7 billion people to 3.5 billion, and then 5 years later, by the way, we're back up to 7 billion.
At
Yeah.
least.
And
Yeah.
oh, dick move, Thanos. I just thought of this. This motherfucker went from planet to planet, wiping out half of the population, right?
Yep.
And
Mhm.
then he snaps.
Right. So
So,
they
like,
lost.
it's like they lost another
They get
half.
half.
Fuck those
Yeah.
planets.
Oh, dude. Oh, you're right.
Oh no.
Well, it was somewhat implied that for the planets he already did it, that they weren't affected.
Okay.
Because he was like, oh no, like that was plan A. Was like, I'm an immortal being. I'm going to go around and do this manually until I can snap. But those of you that are culled are already culled.
Well, it is the Infinity Gauntlet, and with that level of power, I would imagine that he is able to do that.
Yeah.
But still.
Because if Hulk,
But still,
if Bruce Banner was able to specify that, like,
right?
you know, it was a wish at that point. If he was able to specify it down to the point where like the fucking birds came back.
Well, it wasn't
Uh,
Bruce Banner
right.
at that point. It was Tony.
No,
No,
Banner-
Bruce did the unsnap. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, like Tony just was like everybody from this other timeline gone, except for
Right.
Right.
Gamora, conveniently.
Right. Yeah.
I think
Right.
just like Thanos and his men, just
Yeah, and because she'd already turned, she made the cut like
yeah.
right in there by half a second.
Yeah. Probably
Uh,
Tony's head was anybody who's against us right now.
Yeah.
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 And Gamora just like dodged a fucking bullet right there.
Thank God I was on my way to turning anyways.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the Ragnarok, the snap.
Hmm.
I know we're missing something.
Probably Civil War kind of counts.
Well, so you also have the apocalypse in Age of Ultron,
Yeah.
where you have fucking made up country.
Sokovia.
Yeah. That's I would consider that an apocalypse for
No,
them.
yeah, totally.
That's phase 2 though, right? Unless
Is that
I'm
phase 2?
missing it.
No, you're right, but even still,
Oh, okay.
Marvel. We want to talk
Yeah,
about Marvel apocalypses. I mean, I already mentioned Cable.
Listen, no, stop. Don't
We
don't
can
do
talk-
this.
We already
Don't
went
Don't you
there.
do this.
First, I understand the saga.
Thank you for referencing my own podcast to me.
You deserved it.
You're welcome.
I mean, it happened to mutants mostly. Now that I think about it, like the comic books were always like, because mutants represent marginalized classes,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it was always like, hey,
It's some pretty heavy-handed symbolism.
Heavy.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine. We needed that, I think.
yeah, but it was always like, hey, MJ,
Oh, yeah,
you're
yeah.
mutants. And
M Day, ooh man, that's a problematic apocalypse. No more people who aren't white cis heteronormative.
oh my god, I know there's nothing worse than being like, hey, maybe the problem with the world is that we have people that are different and they keep trying to want what they need. That was a comic arc, you guys. That happened.
What comics aren't problematic
No, not at all.
ever.
Completely
Like-
apolitical, especially
ever.
every Captain America comic.
Oh jeez.
Which, by the way, have you heard about the two new superheroes that Marvel's releasing?
I'm out of the game.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Snowflake and Safe Space.
You're joking.
I
That's
am
not,
not.
I don't think
joking.
that's Is that Marvel or
That's
is that
Marvel. I'm pretty sure it's Marvel.
Oh god. Oh that's
I
okay.
checked right now. We will delete this out of here if I'm wrong.
Okay.
New Warriors. Yep, Marvel.
Oh god.
No, guys, no, guys.
And Snowflake is non-binary because that makes it not tone deaf.
Like that makes it worse. Oh my god.
100% it makes it worse.
Like they did such a okay to rewind to find some kind of credibility here when they did God X-Force. I think there was an X-Force. It was like new X-Force where they had sensitive portrayals of gay characters, of characters that were not even remotely human looking but were still treated as human. Like that is some grade A beautiful writing.
Wiccan
What
and
is
Hulkling.
this horse pucky?
Wiccan
Wiccan and
Hulkling.
Hulkling, I think, were handled great.
Beautifully.
Let's hope that like when they come out that like they purposely choose those as their hero names in order to be ironic with it.
Oh,
Like
God,
maybe
no,
that
no,
like
please
they're
don't. I think they just need to. I see where you're going with it. I do, but I think.
I mean, like if they're
something-
gonna do it, obviously, like we can't stop them from doing it, right? Like if they're gonna do it, maybe they're just like,
Oh God, I think if they lean into it, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no digging out of that hole.
No.
Nope.
It's,
Nope.
That's the name of my sex tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no. Oh my god, I just looked it up. That is the most.
Yeah.
That is the most.
Oh,
depressing
believe
thing.
me, and I don't even care that people are like double checking my sources because that shit needs to be double checked. It is too outrageous to believe. When I was told, I was like, "You're wrong. Let me look this up."
Like
Yeah,
somebody's trolling. Like somebody's
right.
got to be trolling.
Well, I looked at the character design and it looked like a 12-year-old's Flash fan art of a character. It looks real bad.
Not that a 12-year-old's Flash fan art is bad. I've seen some good ones, but yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it looks like somebody who's trying to take their first crack at animation, not something I would expect. And like, that's perfectly fine if that's what you're doing. That's not okay if you're Marvel really trying to do whatever the fuck.
I can't believe this got past. I mean, because Disney owns Marvel now. How did not saying that Disney is necessarily a sensitive.
Let's not talk about the problematic stuff that Disney has put out.
But
especially as of late, they have been smarter than this.
Yeah, they realize that there's money to be made in sensitivity.
Yes, and it's like, how did this get all the way up the line, guys? Like,
Well,
I want to know the person who proposed this.
Maybe they'll bring about the great comic apocalypse.
Hey, it's been really close quite a few times.
This is so bad. I'm looking at this whole new Warriors arc, and I'm so upset.
It's horrifying, isn't it?
I mean,
welcome back to comics.
That is not how you're going to get this man back into comics.
I can't. I'm stunned. Like, guys, we can't talk about post-apocalypse. There's a new apocalypse, guys.
Yeah, this is it. This is it right now.
Jiminy Christmas.
Yeah. You just dropped a nuke on this call. I am now a changed comic book mutant. I have extra bulbous growths where my love for superheroes used to be.
It's going to fall off and create its own monster here pretty soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. I'd like to change my answer about what apocalyptic universe I'd like to live in.
Let's go Marvel.
Not
universe.
this one.
Not this one. You beat me to it. I would take Rifts over this.
Do not invoke that.
Oh, wow. It was said.
If you're a tabletop fan and you don't know what the RPG universe Rifts is, congratulations. I've now poisoned you forever because you might Google it and you can never unsee it.
There's somebody who clicked on this because they're like, oh, it's a podcast about post-apocalyptic media. Maybe they'll talk about my favorite game, Rifts. And now they just heard that.
Look, to that person, I have something to say. There are a lot of games, there are a lot of subjects that have done damage to creative industries, but Rifts has done mega damage.
Oh, that's horrifying. You, sir, see yourself out.
Yeah, you're fired. Get out.
However,
Get out my
if you like Robotech, the Robotech is a fantastic use of the Rifts system. But man, if you want, Rifts is for those that don't know, it is a kitchen sink apocalypse. It's literally you're on Earth and portals to every reality have opened up everywhere. So if you want robots fighting aliens, fighting sorcerers, fighting cowboys, you can do that. When I was 14, the idea of being a robot cowboy sorcerer that rode a dinosaur all within this one core book that I could be existed. That was awesome. And then I developed taste, and now Rifts is not awesome. It's just, at least I like to think, it's not good. And the system is also bad. However, if you like Palladium, if you're one of the dozen people on the planet that knows what the Palladium system is, I'm going to bring
it back around after you're done. Go ahead.
There was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle RPG that came out in '85 that had a supplement called After the Bomb. When they could no longer continue to directly print the TMNT license, they were like, how are we going to make it so that people can be mutant animals and still make it but not tie into the Eastman and Laird comics? And so they made it a post-apocalyptic nuclear RPG that pivoted off of that system. Yeah. So I have a copy of After the Bomb. It's awesome. If you're a D&D fan and you're like, man, I want to play a post-apocalyptic thing, but I want it to use the D&D rules that I like a lot, go build a time machine and hunt down a boxed copy of Gamma World, because Gamma World is amazing. Personally, I think it's a better usage of the D&D 4th edition rules than D&D 4th edition ever was, because you sort of use Mad Libs to build your character, but you can be like, I'm a sharp sorcerer with a hubcap sword, and it's
I believe that's
fantastic.
exactly the character I rolled up.
It's so good.
The magic was never in the hubcap.
The magic was the shark the whole time.
Oh, and if we're talking about games and apocalypses, my favorite pre-apocalypse game, Werewolf of the Apocalypse. All right, there we go.
That, I don't know if you've seen Werewolf 20, but they actually they decanonized that the apocalypse was a bad thing, and they're like, no, it's us winning, because the entire time you're playing this game, we've been losing. But the apocalypse was hope all along, you guys.
It was hope. It was hope.
Oh, listen. As like one of two people that bought and read the actual End Times books, this some bullshit.
Yep. End Times books were good.
Yeah, you're talking to the other one.
Listen, good. I'm so glad to be in like company, because the prophecy of the Phoenix was important and dire.
It is valid.
It turns out the prophecy of the Phoenix was hope the whole time.
Stop.
Get out of here, child of Gaia.
Stop.
Baron, you want to go ahead and drop your guild decree right now? Go ahead. You get one an episode. You want to go ahead and use it on...
I'm torn, though. It's like the werewolf in me is like, oh, yeah, this is not about that. But then the Blue Lantern in me is like, oh, it totally is.
Embrace the werewolf side. You know it to be true.
The apocalypse is bad. Guild decree.
Yeah.
Guild decree.
Oh, wait, you guys have the power to canonize shit on your show?
Oh, yeah, we do.
Just once per episode. Each of us gets one.
Yeah.
Oh, I have so many theories that need to be canonized, but I'll wait.
You only get one per show.
Wait.
Each members, you guys can get one guild decree as well.
So wait. Does this mean that we could like submit stuff that like can I put in?
I have a rewrite. I have movie rewrites that I need to be canonized.
Actually, you know that would be cool. Is if we don't have a guild decree, we could actually go through like a list of things that people have sent us that they want us to make a decree. But look, I didn't have a guild decree in here, so I'm going to pick my favorite one here. And yeah, Han shot first. Guild decree.
Oh, I mean that's just true.
No, yeah. I just wanted to pick one.
That's a really good example, because never shot.
To be fair, last episode, like the guild decrees we made were things that are already just like universal truths, or at least they should be. Like my guild decree that episode was that the point of D&D is to tell a good story and nothing else. Like it's not about winning. It's not about or just to tell a good story. That was my guild decree. So that's a universal truth already.
All right, I like it.
What mine was, which is going to be terrible when I have to enforce it.
It's something about metagamers. It was something about metagamers. I'm 80% sure.
No, I have important story canon rewrites that I need to send you guys for guild deliberation.
Yep, send them in for.
Well, you get one right
now. That's true. Pick one.
Oh God, I have many. Okay.
One this episode.
Oh, but it's not related to apocalypses, so I don't.
Just use it.
No. Okay. So
much power. You can't just.
I know, it's dizzying. Okay.
You have 5 seconds, so 5.
Okay,
4.
so Padme was actually in on a plot to kill Anakin the entire time, which is why she acted so bizarrely, and that's actually in the deleted scenes. Therefore, it's canon.
Guild
decree.
Boom.
Holy shit! Guild decree.
Yeah,
I love it.
That's why she was acting so awkward in all of their love scenes.
Yeah, you should see the love scenes they cut. Really awkward.
They didn't even hold hands.
No.
You're never supposed to use a lightsaber that way.
Why don't you ever look at me in the eyes anymore?
Because Misa got somebody else on my mind.
No!
I'm dead. Oh, I've died. I've died.
I bet that whole act is just really floppy. Just a whole bunch of just flopping around and slappy noises.
Stop it.
Oh, sorry.
I don't have a trash can nearby. I can't.
And really wet. Oh wait, no.
No, we're good.
They're both denizens of an extremely aquatic planet. I mean, that is an encounter of the moist kind.
Oh yeah. By the way, this is my revenge for the tiefling horns.
Oh,
That wasn't even on this cast.
I don't even care.
I hope somebody's listening and also watches our D&D streams so
yeah, you'll
they
be
catch
fine.
the joke. I'm not even going to explain it. Nope.
Nope,
If you want to understand that,
Yeah, you gotta go watch it.
Twitch.tv/Casters Guild. Go watch us play D&D. Maybe you'll get that joke.
Rick, do you want to canonize that Kirby is post-apocalyptic?
Yes, Guild Decree. Kirby is post-apocalyptic. Kirby is a 5-year-old child who survived the apocalypse and is now one of 2 of his kind that exist. Guild Decree.
Oof, dang.
Man, I feel like there's so much pressure. Like, man, I don't even know. I'm gonna have to come back. I'm gonna have to like submit. I'm gonna have to submit that later. Like, wow.
This is no flick and say space for not characters. Guild Decree.
Yeah. Do it for the good of mankind. You're really not going to do it. Wow. What a jerk.
I can't decree something that I don't have the power over. Like this so far sounds like opinions or interpretations, and I really like that idea. Like this is turning fanon into canon, is what it sounds like from the outside.
I need to be on many more episodes because I have many theories.
You're just gonna pop in for 5 minutes and be like, Guild Decree. Okay, well,
Guild Decree.
Thanks for calling in, guys.
You kick down the door of the guild hall, you grab a cup of mead, make a guild decree, and then leave.
Yes, that is exactly how I roll.
I am just here for action bureaucracy. That's it. Kick in the door, declare some shit. I'm out.
The only thing we hear is that as you leave is, you should have never given me this power.
Haha, motherfuckers, you about to bring about a bureaucratic apocalypse up in here. You should
brought
have been
this on
afraid.
yourself.
We should have never created the gavel. It was too powerful. The real enemy was signing in triplicate all along.
Okay, yeah, this is probably the best part of any podcast we're ever going to do is the guild decrees. That's it.
Yeah. Legit.
Yeah, fuck. You're gonna get it in an email, but like, this just in breaking news. Breaking news.
Okay, if this podcast
We're going to be
ever
recording episode 7, and I'm going to be like, by the way, I just got written in from Ryan his guild decree from episode 3.
Like, if this podcast ever gets big, we're fucked. We're gonna have people like just emailing us. We're gonna have people who have been on the show emailing our asses and being like, "Yeah, we have some guild decrees that we want to run by you." And then when I use one for myself, they're gonna be like, "Wow, just wasted on that, will ya? I sent you a whole list of guild decrees."
And you'd be like, "Listen, Master Caster run Bartertown, motherfuckers."
Ooh.
You could just throw that out whenever you need it.
Right.
We're talking about the apocalyptic episode. Just
Hell yeah.
You know what? I guild decree that you can make as many guild decrees as you want. You're not limited. It's like wishing for
Oh,
infinite
snap.
wishes.
I don't know how I feel about that one. I don't know.
Is that not loud? Is
And
that
now we have become Death, Destroyer of Guilds.
Yeah, you just created the Casters Guild Apocalypse is what just happened.
There it is.
Oh, shit!
There it is.
Because all we do is sit around and make guild decrees anymore. Like, we can't do anything else. We're just...
The irony will be as if we can never do another show after this.
I'll take the blame for that. Like, I would like to change my answer for the universe. I would like to be in the Casters Guild apocalypse. No.
You already are.
Your wish came true.
Guild decree. Wait.
It turns out that the real apocalypse was podcasts all along.
Jesus Christ.
Ryan, Kat, if anybody likes what they've heard from you today and they want to hear more from you, where can they find you on the internets?
Well, actually, I do a weekly Twitch cast of horror gaming and what makes horror gaming. Scaredy Cat, SKARDEY_KAT on Twitch TV. You can also find me at that on Facebook.
You spelled
Say
that
what?
wrong.
Oh,
There will
spell it.
in the description.
Yeah, your Twitch stream is SKAREDY.
Yeah, see, I had to misspell it because the regular spelling got taken by somebody who doesn't use it. So
we're gonna spell things out for you, but don't listen to us. Just look at the description.
Do that.
Yeah.
Do that. It's on Twitch. I broadcast 8ish on Tuesdays Eastern time, 8ish till about 10:30ish, depending on how scared I get. There will be loud noises and lots of swearing and adult concepts. Yeah. That too. But we play horror games from all of the systems, all the time, everything. Just, you will see. Yeah, but find us there. You can hear our unique brand of humor and unique take on things there. Sweetie, do you have anything you wanted to?
I was gonna say I am no longer in the podcasting realm, but
Here you are.
Yeah, I know. They dragged me back in after retirement for one last mission.
Golly.
I am Digital Lozenge on Twitter and Twitch, and I believe that's also my YouTube name. I don't do regular stuff. However, if you hit me up on Twitter, my main focus when I was in the nerd space was sort of being like a nerd sommelier. So if you just want to ask me about anything, literally any books, movies, games, just I will shout opinions at you. Mostly games, but I'm more than happy to do that. You follow me on Twitter. All I do is talk about games all day, and then occasionally hacking shit if you're that level of nerd. But,
I was gonna say my Twitter is Caffeine Witch. So at Caffeine Witch, also nerd sommelier.
If I do Twitch streams, it's all usually retro stuff. And Kat and I both speak Japanese, so we occasionally will do like Japanese game streams. I like to do a lot of like region locked stuff that never came to the West, just for funsies. So if you have anything that you'd like, you can hit us up on there, and I'll start streaming it. But I like to play weird shit mostly. A lot of the games that feature on my Twitch channel are stuff that you can't play with a controller, simply because I love all of the weird ways in which the gaming space has tried to make us interact with digital media, from Donkey Kong bongos to light guns.
Oh man.
Yeah. So.
Oh.
Guild Train.
Guild Train.
And that's where you can find me.
All right, so thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Casters Guild. We will be back again next week with a new topic. Don't know what it is yet. You'll find out then. Make sure to check us out on twitch.tv/casterguild on Sundays if you'd like to see us play some D&D. And our socials will be available very soon. There'll be links in the description.
All this pending on the world not ending before then. Again, I want to thank our guild members for being here. I had a lot of fun, and I can't wait for next week.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. We need 12
Bye.
more. We need 12 more. Bye. No, I'm kidding.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye. Sayonara.